So the jobs report came out today and it was wildly different than what we saw yesterday. It didn't match what any of the economists were predicting. It didn't match what people are saying on the ground. It didn't match what companies are saying. And I'm just like, okay, so are the Trump people cooking the books? Are they doing some sort of shenanigans? What's going on? That's what I want to talk about with you today. And let's just jump right in. You'll see. So first, Trump people are claiming that we're in a golden age and you're all going to get jobs, you're all going to be rich, etc. Right? That's what he's claiming. Golden age, US economy adds 147,000 jobs, much higher than expected, and unemployment rate unexpectedly falls. So according to Trump, everything's great and it's all so unexpected. That's what he's saying. According to Trump, the US is on track to break every record of growth. Go Republicans, beat the crooked Democrats tonight. Pro-growth, tax cuts never fail, make America great again. This stuff doesn't make sense, right? Where are these jobs coming from? And is this your experience on the ground? We just talked about yesterday, the ADP report came out and it was basically jobs to the downside, losing jobs. And so how are Trump people claiming victory here? I want to go over this. This is from MarketWatch. They break it down really, really well. And I want to share my thoughts on this one and I want to get yours also. It says the June jobs report is grimy under the hood. Here's a few key numbers that tell us why. And you're going to see sort of how the Trump people are calculating these things. The economy created a seemingly healthy 147,000 new jobs in June, and unemployment rate fell to a 4-month low. Great news, right? Not if you look under the hood. Okay, what's it say? A close look at the June employment report suggests the labor market actually deteriorated last month. Fewer companies were hiring and more people stopped looking for work because jobs were harder to find. And that part I've seen in several reports. We talked about this the last couple of months, as you guys know. Again, fewer companies are hiring and people are quit looking because it's too hard to find a job. We also know that recently Microsoft laid off a bunch of people, right? We've been seeing these reports. Here's a quote here. The June jobs report suggests the underlying trend in the economy was very tepid in June and in the second quarter. So that's coming from a chief economist over at Comerica. And again, the numbers that the Trump people were pointing out there didn't match what people were saying on the ground. Here's more. Of the 147,000 new jobs created, half were in state and local government. So they're claiming job growth in state and local government. The private sector added the fewest new workers in 8 months. Not good, right? The rise in state and local hiring was also a mirage since fewer school employees than usual became unemployed last month. The government's seasonal adjustment process made it seem like there was a big increase in education jobs. So this is where a little bit of trickeration or a foolery is going on here. It's how we calculate this stuff. There wasn't. In fact, the actual or unadjusted number of state and local jobs fell last month. That's what usually happens at the end of the school year. So they're finagling the numbers a bit. You can see it right here. Let's see some more here. And you have to understand how these numbers are done. The private sector, meanwhile, added a meager 74,000 jobs in June, marking the smallest gain in 8 months. Again, I think you all know this from being on the ground. You'll know from asking, say, students that are graduating college this year, is it easy to find a job or not? I've already seen reports that people are saying no one's hiring. And again, I know that Microsoft is firing. That was recent. It's just Microsoft, but it's in multiple industries and multiple companies. What else did I have to say? That's bad enough. Even worse, almost all the new jobs were created in just one part of the economy, healthcare. Hardly any other industry was hiring. That's probably true. So I've said this several times on the channel. Nurses are in high demand, doctors, these kind of things. But a lot of Americans don't want to do these jobs. So actually we import a lot of talent. When I was in LA, actually, many nurses were Filipino or Russian and other countries. So if you want a job, that's a high growth area. So that's probably true. Healthcare is where there is growth. What about the decline in unemployment rate? It fell a tick to 4.1%. And remember, I think we were at 4.2 last read, and the economists were actually expecting 4.3. They were actually expecting unemployment to go up. So how are we going down at 4.1? Well, it depends how you want to calculate it, right? The real reason was that some 329,000 people dropped out of the labor force, with many of them saying they were too discouraged by how hard it was to find a job. It's an ongoing trend of 2025. I've seen estimates anywhere that the real unemployment rate could be around 7 to 8-ish%, maybe higher, but something in that ballpark. And what we're talking about is people who quit looking for work because it's too tough. They just, after say a year or so, you just, I'm not finding anything and just kind of give up. You're also talking about maybe people are underemployed. They have a job, it just doesn't pay enough. Or maybe someone does have a job, for example, but it's more part-time, right? It could be a gig economy, not necessarily something with any sort of benefits or any sort of regularity. So, when you talk about unemployment 4.1, you also have to just talk about all those other categories. And I think, again, I think this inherently. I just want to just go through the numbers of sort of how they're coming up with this stuff, because it was completely different than what I was expecting. I kind of had a general sense of where it would go, and the Trump numbers are just like, what the heck? This is like way to the upside, and it just doesn't match what I'm hearing from people. This is more. The so-called participation rate fell in June to 2.5-year low of 62.3%, down from the post-pandemic peak of 62.8 2 years ago. This rate tells us what share of people of working age either have a job or are looking for one. Again, people are just quitting. They're just giving up on trying to find something. Don't look for a participation rate to improve either, for good or ill. The Trump administration's crackdown on immigration has squeezed the labor supply. Another sign of weakness: companies are no longer giving big pay raises each year, since leverage in the labor market has shifted to employers from employees. So basically, if there's a shortage of workers, then they're like, hey, come take this job, we'll give you a massive bonus, pay raise, etc. But we're not seeing that anymore. And I'd like to hear from you guys on the ground. Have you heard of anyone getting massive bonuses and pay raises, these kind of things? We're not seeing it here. It says the increase in worker pay in the past year slowed to 3.7 in June, just a hair above the pre-pandemic peak. Then you got this. What about the numbers at all coming from the Trump people? And this has actually been something that I've been concerned about since even before Trump went into office, because they were talking about this, changing the way that they calculate stuff. So for example, this is from Bloomberg. Trump budget plan raises concern over cuts to Statistics Bureau, right? So they want to fire people over there who calculate the data. They've already been saying, what's the cuts here? 8% they're looking at cutting to people who track these statistics, and it matters, right? The Trump administration is proposing to cut resources from the Bureau of Labor Statistics when the agency is already reeling from years of budget constraints, right? And then this raises concerns about the quality and the quantity of data produced about the U.S. economy. And when you don't have good data on what the economy is up to, like, people lose faith in the system and lose faith in our markets. That's why it's important to track this stuff. This is coming from Bloomberg today. This is what they write. They say June's unemployment rate fell, defying our and the consensus forecast for a rise, and payrolls grew a decent clip. So they're like, I don't know where these numbers came from, right? But we don't think this suggests the labor market is in solid shape, as the unemployment drop was due to exits from the labor force, right? People just give up. While payroll gains were exaggerated by a Bureau of Labor Statistics model that seeks to measure the impact of business formations and closures. So even Bloomberg is saying the numbers are exaggerated here, but from the Trump people. You also got this: the private payroll sector gained 74,000 jobs, is the weakest since last October. And then you even have Fed Powell talking about the whether or not the data come from the government is any good. So listen to what he says. It's interesting.
I wouldn't say that I'm concerned about the data today, although clearly there has been a very mild degradation of the scope of the surveys and things like that. But I would say the direction of travel is something I'm concerned about, and that is measuring the U.S. economy carefully and well is a project that's been going on, and we're getting better at it for 100 years and more. And it's really important, not just for the Fed, but for Congress and for businesses, frankly, to know what really is going on in the economy. What's happening? Is growth high? Is it low? And all those sorts of things. So I think it's a smart investment to just continually try to get better at measurement of what's happening in the economy. And I don't like to see that, the kind of stories I'm reading, and the idea being that the data is going to become more volatile and less reliable. That'll make it more difficult for the private sector and for you and for us. And I don't like to see that direction.
I agree. Thank you.
So he was asked, like, what do you think about the quality of the data? What do you think about the budget cuts to people who, track the data in the government? And then that was Powell's answer. Obviously, he wants good data, right? We all do, but this is what the Trump people, they want to cut as much as they can. And there was another weirdly weird thing, and this has come from Bloomberg. It was a part here where they were talking about, I'll read it. It says, payrolls exceeded almost all forecasts. So like no one saw these numbers coming, right? It's strange. Figures for the prior 2 months were revised by a cumulative 16,000. So they went back to the prior months and like made the numbers higher, which is strange because usually when they do these revisions lately, it's usually been to the downside. Usually been the government's actually been over aggressive and like, hey, we got all these jobs, et cetera. And then they end up revising it down. So that's usually what you expect, but they're revising it up. So everything came out way rosier than what anyone thought. And then Trump is claiming we're in a golden age. So in my opinion, I think a lot of this stuff is hooey, but we went through the details of it. So I'm just showing you guys sort of where we're getting this ideas. And the most important thing though is that don't let Trump tell you how you're feeling. Don't let Trump tell you like how great it is. You'll know yourself, right? The joke that people are saying is Trump's like, hey, don't believe your lying eyes. Believe we're in the golden age. But no, seriously, don't listen to what Trump says. Listen to what you know. Listen to what your friends know. Listen to what your coworkers say. You'll know whether or not your industry is hiring or firing. You'll know from people around you. And then we track all this stuff together. We talk about it in our community. And to be perfectly frank, it is nice to have you guys here because we keep each other sane. So I do appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.